And if the explanations are not clear, please, by all means, ask for clarification. And I would appreciate it also that when we come to questions and answers, there are three different categories. Number one, the questions and answers in regard to what has been taught. And sometimes when the teaching is given and you need more clarification, you can ask in that area. And some of you have done well in the area. Usually, Gmail, you have done very well. All your questions relate to what has been taught. And then sometimes some of your questions and answers are just like related to things in your personal life and things that you're struggling through, things you want to seek to understand. And you take the opportunity to ask because we do have a Q&A. One fine day, as we grow in the Lord, now we're still a small group, I will divide the questions to three different types of categories. And because now we're a small group, but the day will come when we have 10,000 people or 100,000 or 1 million gathered, and you can't possibly answer every question. And so the first category of questions that I enjoy answering is related directly to the topic, because that means that while I'm teaching, you're actually hearing. And while you're hearing, there's some parts you say, okay, I need more understanding of this or more on that. So your questions relate to that, and that would be good. In fact, the disciples of Jesus, when they have time of Q&A with Jesus, especially you notice when he is talking about the end time, they ask questions relevant to the end time. And they didn't just suddenly ask out of far topic. That means you're not really listening, and you're just listening with a lot of other things in your life. But I can understand everyone have different types of puzzles, enigmas, questions in their life that they need to answer in order to take the next step forward. And then in time to come, we might have an entire session just for Q&A, if that benefits you. So we would do that. But there is a third category that I notice. You see, while you're asking questions, I'm also analyzing you. And I can classify all your Q&A throughout all these years to three categories. One, directly relevant to the topic. And sometimes now you ask on Sunday about Friday, that's still fine. And I prefer that on a Friday, ask on a Friday. But it's still okay because you're still thinking through and listening to. But it's still relevant to the first category. Second category are questions from your own lives that you have prayed, you struggled through, you want to understand more, or a historical event or things taking place in the world, you want to understand more. So that's the second category, both from the Bible and from relevant things in your life or relevant things on the planet Earth that are happening that you need a spiritual perspective. That's fine. But the third category can come from just out of the blue. I mean, it's totally not relevant to anything or anyone. And it's just something that, I don't think it's really relevant to your personal life, but it's just like out of the blue questions that has, I would say it's like under others, where it just pulls every mind's thinking towards another direction. Each question we ask brings you to a flow of a topic. And even when I preach, as I touch a different subject, I bring your mind and thoughts to a certain direction. And so sometimes it's important to maintain a certain direction. And when you're driving a car from point A to point B, you don't go to point C, point D, point E before you reach point B. You target point B. There's a time and place when you're a tourist, and you can go to point E, point F, things that are just look-see, I call it. And so understand that even while you're asking questions, I'm also analyzing and to see the flow. And sometimes things are not appropriate for the flow. Like, for example, if we were touched by God and we're at a point where our tears are flowing, at that point, is it relevant to ask a question about what is the cube of 2,753? Irrelevant, because it just took us from an emotional time of being touched into some mathematical puzzle that has nothing to do with emotions. And so sometimes it's also important to learn appropriateness. And, children are children, and adults can be having a conversation about things of life or their plan or planning for the next 2 years or 3 years or planning a particular trip. And a child will just come up and say, hey, what happened to my blue and red ice cream in the fridge? Children are children. And so some of you might laugh or might feel embarrassed as I speak all these things. But one day, even when you go to heaven, yes, even when you go to heaven, there is still such a thing as appropriateness. When you enter into the temple of God, the Holy of Holies, there are certain thoughts, thinking, and speech that are not relevant there, but only things pertaining to that. And then perhaps when you're visiting one of the far out worlds of God's universe and creation, and you're wondering what some of the things you saw are, then you can speak and think of those things in the area. Yes, not only in this life, but also in heaven. There are things that are appropriate to ask, things appropriate to think. This type of spiritual maturity comes through time. And we learn how to flow, to maximize things. And of course, I do try to control the situation by pulling everyone's thoughts back to the topic. But in the first place, why should you go off topic? And so it's a means of control sometimes. And we need to understand all those things. Or sometimes let a particular topic be completed first before you go to the next topic. So it's more consistent with everyone's ability to think through. And if we are seeking the mind of Christ, to think through the mind of Christ as a group, because the church can be one heart, one mind, one soul. And then you think through one thing at a time. Even in the corporate world, whatever field you're in, when a board is meeting and when a committee is meeting, a subcommittee is meeting to solve a problem, they don't spend time on irrelevant things. If there's a meeting to solve an electrical breakdown of half of the country, during that time, they don't talk nonsense. They will talk things relevant to how to solve the problem. And so each meeting is appropriate to its own things. As you understand the mind of Christ, you understand how to flow with the thought pattern or thought flow. And the mind is not just all over the place.